We've got a massive blockbuster three-way deal involving the Senators, Avalanche, and Predators to discuss. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to Top Shelf Hockey. As most of you have probably heard by now, there's major breaking news in the NHL as of last night. Major three-way deal that almost went down Friday night into Saturday actually did happen on Sunday. Obviously, the Senators acquire Matt Duchene from the Colorado Avalanche. The Senators then trade Kyle Turris to the Nashville Predators, who immediately signed a 6-year, $6 million contract extension with the Predators. In return, the Colorado Avalanche receive prospect Shane Bowers from the Ottawa Senators, goaltender Andrew Hammond, a first-round pick in 2018, a third-round pick in 2018. That first-round pick is lottery protected, so for any reason the Senators end up with a top 10 pick, they have the option to keep the pick and default to the following year. And then out of the Predators, the Avalanche also receive a prospect, defenseman Gerard, another prospect, I don't have his name right handy, but he was a Russian player playing for their minor league team for the past couple of seasons, as well as a second-round draft pick. Obviously, it looks like the Colorado Avalanche, even though they've been holding off on this deal for a long time, they certainly did really well, and they're pulling in what a lot of people are calling a king's ransom. And I think, obviously a lot of these assets are future assets, so we'll see how everything pans out for the Avalanche. Well, Sens fan, leave me a comment down below. Are you guys happy with Matt Duchene's arrival in Ottawa? Certainly should be interesting. I know for a lot of Senators fans, losing Kyle Turris is probably a little bit bittersweet, but based on all the reports and news stories since the season started, that they were having a very difficult time reaching a contract extension, it certainly makes, at least Pierre Dorion was able to put him into getting something in return, as opposed to losing him as an unrestricted free agent this summer, or letting this drag on all year and maybe doing a deadline deal. Obviously over time you had to wonder how much of a distraction this was going to be for Ottawa, and obviously I'm sure as an organization at least, they're happy to get this done sooner rather than later. I must say, from the Senators' perspectives, I know there's some people out there that seem to think that Ottawa overpaid, and I guess time will tell whether or not they did. A lot of these types of trades, you can't really tell for at least a couple of years, if not more, how things pan out and who really won the deal. But Ottawa was able to protect most of their coveted prize prospects. Thomas Chabot, Colin White, Logan Brown, Schlappick, none of these guys were involved. There was a lot of discussion for the last year or more that the Avalanche really wanted Cody Ceci. Well, he didn't get put in the deal as well. Not to say that Shane Bowers wasn't, a prize pick. He obviously had, I think, a lot of potential. But at the same time, if you look back at their depth chart with their prospects, he's recently been passed by guys like Logan Brown. Even Alex Formenton this year had a great showing in camp and proved that he could probably play in the NHL level sooner than later. So they just have too many prospects anyway. There's obviously not going to end up in a situation where they're all going to play in Ottawa, even if they all develop into NHL players, because there's not going to be any room. The other good plus here for the Ottawa Senators is they get goaltender Andrew Hammond's contract off the books. Now I realize this was his last year under contract, but at the same time, bringing a guy like Duchene, money has to go out as well. Kyle Turris obviously gets moved out, but for right now, he wasn't making as much as Duchene. Obviously, when the new contract kicks in, he will be. But you throw in the Hamburglar's contract, that certainly makes things a little bit more manageable for the Senators as well. One question that keeps coming up with a lot of Sens fans and media is, whatever happened with Kyle Turris? This just seems really strange, how Kyle Turris has been such a good player for Ottawa for so long now. I mean, he's been there, I believe it's been 7 years. Last year's playoffs, he was one of their top performers. I think he scored a lot of big overtime goals for them in a lot of big moments. So obviously he can be a big game player when he needs to be as well. And really over the summer, I know there wasn't a whole lot speculated around his contract extension. Depending on how close you paid attention to hockey media over the summertime when things aren't as busy, you may or may not have picked up on a few things here and there to lead you to believe that things weren't going well with the contract for Kyle Turris. Obviously, it looks as though one quote, if you read an article by Ian Mendez, indicated that he interviewed Turris at, I believe it was a golf tournament in September, and Turris was asked around his contract and how things were going, what to expect, And his answer was quite surprising, saying that if things didn't get done by the start of the season, that wasn't going to be good, and that he didn't want to discuss it throughout the season. So obviously it looked like the writing might have been on the wall right then and there. Opening night, we heard hockey insider Darren Dreger on TSN comment how the Senators might be looking to trade Kyle Turris. I know that took a lot of fans off guard, and a lot of people were kind of blindsided going, what's going on here? Obviously they should be negotiating an extension. He's been such a good player for the Sens. What's going on? Now it's hard to say exactly behind the scenes what was all discussed and what was all said on both sides. Obviously we know Kyle Turris has had a little bit of a history of contract issues. That's how he ended up with the Senators in the first place. But at the same time, I think Kyle Turris is a lot older now. He's obviously a lot more mature. Not to say that he didn't have some valid points in what happened with the Coyotes. Kyle Turris and Matt Duchene, I think, are very comparable players. I think Matt Duchene might come with a little bit more of a, I don't know, maybe a superstar tag. But really, at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that Matt Duchene's a bigger star than Kyle Turris. I think if you look back at their type of play that they can do on the ice, their statistics, etc., I think they're very comparable players. Hopefully Duchene can find chemistry with Ottawa wingers. I'm not sure who he'll play with yet. I mean, obviously Derek Brassard and Mark Stone have been clicking tremendously this year, so I would think that they'll stay together. I know they've played Hoffman a bit with that line at times, and he's played with Pajot. Personally, I think Duchene would fit really well with Dzingel and Hoffman. I think that line would have a lot of speed and a lot of skill, and I think that would be really fun to watch. So I really hope Guy Boucher might give that a try, because I think that would be great for the Senators. If you can put maybe Bobby Ryan back with Brassard and Stone when he comes back from injury, and you have Ryan, Brassard, Stone, and you have Hoffman, Duchene, Dzingel. Personally, I think that's a pretty solid top six group. You still got Pajot, you still got Zach Smith after that. You know, Colin White hopefully will be back up to the big club at some point this season. You know, Burrows and Thompson and Pyatt. They have a really good group of forwards beyond that. So I think overall, I think this is a good move for Ottawa. It does suck to lose Kyle Turris, but if they're going to lose him anyway, they're better off to bring back an asset like Duchene. They're going to hold off a year and redoing that contract. Gives them more time to figure things out longer term where their other prospects are at, and kind of really evaluate guys like Logan Brown, Colin White, etc. so they can figure out long term what works best for this team. If there are any Predators fans watching this video, you get a heck of a player in Kyle Turris. Kyle Turris is going to be proven to be a top center for you guys. I know, throw him in with Ryan Johansson, put Nick Bedino in third line role, and that Predator team is pretty solid. Obviously, we saw how close the Preds came to the Cup last year. Throwing in Kyle Turris in the mix is just going to make them that much stronger and that much more likely to have a good chance of getting back to where they came from. Obviously, the Senators were close as well last year. The Preds did get a tiny bit closer. If it wasn't for that Game 7 overtime goal from Chris Kunitz, the Senators might have played the Predators in the finals, and things might have been a little bit different for either club possibly. Either way, I think Nashville did really well in this trade as well. Picking up a guy, quality person and player like Kyle Turris is good for them. Signed him to a very reasonable contract, $6 million at 6 years. I think that's a good deal for Turris, good deal for the Predators. The Predators have a lot of their core guys now signed for long term. If you take a look at their contracts for a big chunk of their forward group and their decor, they're not going to have to worry about contracts for a long time. The only time they're going to have issues is if this team proves they can't win, then they're going to have a lot of contracts that they're stuck with for a long time. I want to hear your comments. Let me know what you think. Are you excited for Duchene? You sad for Turris to go? I want to know your thoughts. Do you think the Senators are a better team? Because no matter how much you might like individual players, as a fan, I think you need to look at it as, at the end of the day, after the trade, do we have a better hockey team today than we did yesterday? You know, I guess time will tell if the answer is yes or no to that. I think that it's quite possible the answer is yes. I think the Senators were able to get a great player. You know, there's a good likelihood that Turris was going to be gone anyway. So the fact they could bring Duchene back and not lose any of too many of their prized prospects. You know, there's been rumored for so long about some of the other top prospects being involved, and they weren't. So at the end of the day, there's some arguments out there that Pierre Dorion overpaid. I'm not in that group. I think that he did really well for this team. I think Pierre's an excellent general manager, and he's been obviously after Duchene for a long time. He's seen the fact that the Turris deal wasn't going to come together the way they needed it to work for the organization, and he was able to turn that into an excellent blockbuster trade to help this team go forward. So if you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you leave me some comments down below. I definitely want to know what you think of this Matt Duchene blockbuster trade. If this is your first time to the channel, hit that subscribe button in the middle of your screen and keep watching Top Shelf Hockey.